I am really excited to introduce you to somebody who is just an awesome friend of mine. It's kind of been really cool getting to know Talita over the last, I guess it would be a year and a half, maybe. And yeah, it's been interesting as we follow along with this idea of digital mission work online and how to do that authentically. We kind of hit a spot where we're going, well, who are we actually going to talk to? Because there are people that do like amazing things with, massive digital ministries. And then there are those of us that kind of, with the power of like our phone, very grassroots kind of approach where we're starting something up. And so I thought, let's have a chat with somebody who started from the bottom and is now kind of excelling in a sense. And I thought of you, Talita.
Thank you. Not sure if I think of myself that way as excelling, but thanks.
Yeah. So to give a bit of a background, the way I came across you, Talita, was, I guess it was a bit of networking. Talita's husband at the time when I'd met them was the communications director for the local North New South Wales conference. And I was always really blown away by his photography and these types of things. And then somehow we got introduced as well, I think, through the fact that one day we saw your young boy Malachi running around at camp, or something was happening. And then we kind of got talking about what you do. So I was wondering if you explain to those that are tuning in tonight, or those that are going to be tuning into this later, what is it that you are doing with the online space?
Okay, so I run a food and women's health hormone blog, and my main presence is on Instagram. So that's really the platform I chose to grow my blog. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing that for since 2016, but I took a very long break when I had my baby. So for me, that year doesn't count. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. And so this food blog, was it something that you were just thinking, oh, I'm kind of bored? Or did you think, oh, there's a need here and this is something that I really want to do? How did you kind of come across the idea?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer, because I look back and I'm not really sure what I was thinking. I just think at the stage I was, in the middle of my health journey, and I was experimenting so much with food, and I was food just brought me so much joy, and I ended up just taking photos of my food and putting it on my personal Facebook account. And I had a lot of people to sort of tell me, well, you should start a blog. And I didn't think much of it at the time. But after a while, I just sort of thought, well, let's see what skills I have that I can use. And I actually don't have a lot of other experience in work. Like, I've got my degree that I used to work, but I didn't work a lot as a teenager. I don't have a lot of work experience in anything else. So I just thought, to potentially bring my family maybe a little bit of extra income with the skills that me and my husband have together. And that's pretty much how it started. I remember reading a very misleading other blog post about how you can make money online through blogging. And I think it hit me that, well, I could potentially do this and maybe support myself as a mum when I have a child. And also, like if I decided to go back to uni, which I have now, and it was just sort of something that I thought I could do because there wasn't really much else that I had in terms of skills. Yeah, that's about it.
That's really interesting. I know like a lot of people have a really mixed experience with, work in high school and job experience while they're studying. There's a lot of, there's a split attitude between, yes, you should work to support yourself while you're studying, versus no, you need to focus on your studies. And so I'm sure a lot of people really identify with that you can never make anyone happy with that. And so
yeah, I think my family was very much got a bit of a lag here, but yeah, my family was very much just stay and study. So I was never pushed to sort of work to support myself. And yeah, pros and cons, I guess.
Cool. So it sounds as though you said that blog was quite misleading, and I'd love to kind of address that a bit later. But I did have a couple of questions for you, and I thought we kind of run through them as we go through tonight. What specifically, you mentioned earlier that you had a journey with food, or you had a journey with health, and food somehow became, at the forefront of that. In 25 words or less, or, in a brief summary, what brought you to that place?
I basically had a very severe reaction to the contraception that I took when I first got married, which led me to a point of seizures. And I tried pharmaceutical drugs, which helped, but in the long run, they made me worse. And in the end, I had to turn to food to make me better. And beforehand, I hated food. I was very, very fussy eater, and I barely ate much. Definitely not a big variety of food. And really, once I turned to food, I saw just how quickly and dramatically my health started to improve. And that just gave me a love and a passion for it, because food delivered for me where pharmaceuticals and medicine had failed. So that's really it. Yeah.
And I can imagine you mentioned that it was sometimes, I don't know even if there is a taboo surrounding the discussion of contraceptives and women's health and that kind of thing. But there is, I believe, and through experience, that is such an important thing in our health message, to address the fact that so much of our physical and mental and emotional well-being and even spiritual well-being comes down to what's going on with our hormones. And as especially as women, because there's a lot kind of going on there. When did you go, okay, this is an experience that I'm having with this, and I really feel compelled to share that? At what point did you think, this needs to go public?
It was actually not that long ago, because initially when I started my blog, it was just a means for me to share my recipes and, my sort of any little bit of knowledge that I had about plant-based eating. But I think for me in my health journey, it took me a very long time to really reach a point of closure over what I experienced. And it actually took me, I never really got a lot of help or answers from all the medical appointments that I attended. And it actually took me the birth of my little boy and what went around there, to finally understand what my story had been and gain closure over it. And it made me angry. It made me angry that no one was able to help me. And so I decided to just research more in this space. And the more I researched into it, the more and more closure and answers that I got over it. And once I started to share about it, it just it really shocked and surprised me how many other women are in a similar place, and how little information there is out there for women in this space. So yeah, and now it's like the only thing I want to talk about. So it's become a really big passion of mine. Yeah,
and it's really interesting. You're mentioning earlier that you were such a fussy eater, and I know that a lot of people will listen back to this, and maybe even some people that are listening in what is morning for a few of the people that are tuning in, what is night, but that is experience that with children and with childhood, and depending on the culture in which you grew up in. I know that from what you shared with me in the past, that was something that impacted that, and then you have such an overwhelming culture of diet fads and perspectives on how you should look, and how that is, how that determines your worth. And so I can imagine coming out of that being such a, almost like a trauma, healing from like a trauma that your body's used to in a lot of ways. I guess in my experience, hearing your story and reading back on your blogs and kind of learning about this, for me as somebody that stepped into the church and experienced these struggles with different synthetic adjustments to hormones and that type of stuff in my body, and for young people as well, especially, well, let's speak about women here because it's generally directly affecting them. So contraceptives aren't just used obviously for birth control, but in a lot of senses if people are diagnosed with things like endometriosis, acne problems, irregular menstrual cycles, all sorts of things like these. Young people as young as 12 or 13 are being put on these medications. And so if we're hearing of the journey that you took to come out of, the impact that had on your body in such a short amount of time, I can imagine that this food, somehow this health message in a way that we have to share, is going to be so important for people that have a varied experience with the use of contraceptives and synthetic hormone replacement medication and that kind of thing. So it's interesting. This is a hard topic, I think, sometimes to address, especially in the church, because there's, people will have an attitude, or sometimes they'll struggle with whatever your story is. There might be some assumptions made for what you're using, what you're not using, and there's a lot of shame for women. Did you find when you were first kind of speaking about, oh, actually, like I used this and this impacted my body in this way, did you have fear or anxiety or any worry about that, or did you just really feel compelled to?
I personally didn't, no. I'm very willing to share of it, because for me this has been a journey with God, and I feel like God allowed me to go through what I did to the extent that I did, because he wanted me to learn and he wanted me to speak out. And honestly, I really did struggle with a lot of anger over my experience for a long time. So the anger made me just very willing to share my story. But you did mention that though, and I do know that I did have some family members that were a little bit taken aback by me being so, open and willing to share it, because maybe that's something that they wouldn't have wanted out in the world. But for me, no, I don't look at it that way. I think just knowing how many women struggle is, I just didn't care, basically.
Yeah. That's that point where you're just like, you know what?
No, it's so too much.
Yeah.
It affects, hormone problems that don't exactly they're not life-threatening most of the time, but they really severely impact quality of life, and it's so prevalent. I think the closest estimate is about 80% of all women will struggle with some sort of hormonal imbalance, and that will also mean some sort of mental imbalance as well, because our hormones and our mental health are so closely linked. So it's, we have to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's Ellen White herself talks about the idea that the mind and the body are so sympathetic with each other. When one is suffering, another one is. We read that in Ministry of Healing. And I really encourage women and men who associate with women to actually read, when it talks about the mind and the body and the relation between the two in Ellen White's writing, actually to read it from a perspective of, how does endocrinology and hormonal health, for instance, fit into that? And that's, for women especially, we go through so many changes that, you get to a certain age and all of a sudden there's a total shift again in a woman's body. And so understanding how that's going to impact not just her body, but her mental health, and therefore your interpersonal relationships, and therefore
that's right.
whether or not a deaconess is going to get aggro with you in a church on a Sabbath afternoon accidentally because she's just wiped out. And I think that's, there's so many practical elements of why this is important. I just wanted to really thank you for stepping out in that space. I guess the question comes down to, yes, this is an unusual way to approach the health message for a lot of people. But you have grown your following. I was looking at your Instagram the other day. We were talking about when I first followed you, you had 44,000 followers on your Instagram page, right? And then I was looking at it the other day and it's hit 60, and I was just like, how long has it been? Like, I've just got a measly 1,000 and I'm fine with that. Like, but how, at what point did you go, let's make this let's make this professional and let's see how big we can grow this?
Well, that point was actually right at the beginning for me. I think I'm a little bit of an all or nothing type person, which has pros and cons again. It hasn't always done me well, but I just really put my mind to it at the beginning, and the beginning stretch was very hard. So that first 1K was very difficult, and then the next 10K was very, very difficult. But once you hit that 10K, it does sort of just take care of itself after that. I definitely committed from the beginning, and I think it took me about 6 months to reach 1K, and then it took me another 6 months to reach 10K. So it does grow quite quick. That was a while ago now. Things are definitely a bit harder now in terms of Instagram and the algorithm, and the fact that it's just way more saturated than it was a few years ago. But yeah, after I took a big break with my baby, I started to lose quite a lot of followers, and I was sort of entering back into it when the platform had changed. And so I had to really learn how to grow it again. And that first year being back in the space after I'd taken pretty much a year off was just as difficult as when I first started out. So it was just trial and error, to be honest. I didn't really know what I was doing. But I was committed from the beginning, and I was committed to the quality of the photography as well. And I knew that I had, my husband to lean on for that. And we just continually try and make it better and better as we go. And yeah, don't know if that really answers the question, but
it kind of it's getting there. So there's this, you said right from the get-go, you were committed to making this like a long-term kind of, to have an impact that, let's admit the world wants to see, when it comes to like official content or like research content, that kind of thing, the world wants to see good quality aesthetic stuff, right? So you've got Instagram things that are perfectly curated, and this idea of even the writing in your captions is well thought out, and it's not just here's a photo of me and my dog on a Sunday, like it's very intentional.
Sometimes I do it.
Well, your stories are a little bit different, but that's a fun part about your Instagram that I want to address as well. So you have, I think you were talking the other night when I caught up with you about how you would connect with people. You were sharing with another couple actually, that you would authentically connect with people. So you would go onto their pages, and how would you connect with others so that they would follow you and engage with your content?
I think the trick is at the beginning is to really hone down on your niche. So I had to do this twice at the beginning for my plant-based audience, and you basically follow all the other influencers in the sphere and connect with them. And I really have made a lot of really great friends with other influencers online because you'll know that you have similar interests. And then it's about engaging with their audience as well. So, even just going through their comments on some of their photos, and just going to their page and just leaving a thoughtful comment, maybe about some of their recipes or just about anything in general. And then that will just sparks people's interest, and then they sort of go and have a look at your profile, and if they like it, they can follow along. And sometimes you just end up, I do a lot of chatting in my DMs with just random people that you meet on Instagram as well. And that's really just how you do it. That's how I did it the second time around. The first time around, it was a little bit easier, where I just, it really was just about sort of connecting and engaging and making friends with other influencers. And then you share each other's sort of photos. Whereas now you have to be a little bit more intentional about it, and you have to connect with the followers as well, who aren't necessarily influencers, but yeah.
Good work. This sometimes happens in your videos, right? It'll be like, so Talita's son Malachi will sometimes just show up in it and be like, oh, okay, we're talking about something.
Yeah.
Just there. But you know what, the thing is, I think some people forget with the online space, and just to reiterate, people that are tuning in right now, there is a question and answer, and I know somebody's just asked this question. great question. And I realized just a moment ago that I forgot to share this. So the question is, what is the name of your blog and Instagram?
Okay, so my blog is Hazel and Cacao. So on Instagram, that's Hazel _and_ cacao. So that's CACAO.
Yeah. And just to speak to that, that name, it is very much, there's a saturation of your content that is very much filled with hazelnut and like beautiful cacao recipes and very gentle, the focus being, as I understand it, very much focused on improving hormonal health. And but also it's like it's for the entire family, really. It's not just like, it seems as though everything that you're making, Malachi is enjoying, Maddie's certainly enjoying. If I'm ever invited over or come past after you've just photoshoot a whole lot of raw desserts and I enjoy them. Sorry that we can't share that via here, but so yeah, and I think, so the name is really, I think that's one thing that I want to mention. When I came across it, I was like, oh, that's a really catchy name. And even the website, which is hazelandcacao.com, which is a blog full of your, not just recipes, but also, the research that you've been doing before your degree study and now during your study. I was just like, I love seeing how food and health was really being united, but in a way that's personable and like shares a testimony. And I think that's something that I really want to encourage people, if they're starting up an Instagram and if they're starting up like a blog or a recipe page, to make it point back to this idea of, in a very conversational way, pointing back to the beautiful laws of health that God's blessed us with since creation, and I think that's something that you do beautifully, but not in a way that's kind of like, here's the Adventist logo. Just so you know, like I follow the 28, or I think they're 28. Are they 29? I'm not too sure. 28 fundamental beliefs. I'm probably going to get, stoned for that later. And I'm probably going to get stoned for that comment as well. Just bury myself. But yeah, it's clear that you are doing the work of God, and yet you're not necessarily trumpeting, Adventism. And I guess my question is, how do you kind of keep the gospel at the heart of what you're doing? Like, how do you now see that, yes, this is something that I shared just for the sake of people's health, but now that's transition? Do you find that you're having those transitional conversations?
Sometimes, yeah, I do. I think for me, I guess it depends what you mean by gospel, but for me, I think there's a lot of confusion in the food space because there's so many diets out there and etc. So I think for me, and I can get confused as well, there's a lot of research that can point to a lot of different things. But for me, it's always taking it back to living by design and the way that God designed us to be. And not that we are in that place now, because we're in a world of sin and things have changed and it's not exactly the way it was supposed to be. But that really sort of grounds me, and it helps me sort of provide other people with direction, because I'll always know I can take it back to the way that God designed us to be. And the more closely we live in line with that, the better our health will be in a way. And so, yeah, I guess like in terms of the gospel, I've had a few instances where it has led to different conversations as well. And it does live, it's not just about food, it starts to get into lifestyle. And for me in particular, because hormones are so closely related to our mental health, I do like to speak a lot about anxiety and mental health, and spirituality is a big part of that as well. That I wouldn't know how to address those things without addressing the spiritual component, because God was a massive part of my healing from my anxiety. So yeah,
I think and that's I've noticed some people that you're one person that I think you and I were both surprised. There's a young woman in Australia that shares, she's called Bright Girl Health. And she basically educates young women on what's actually really truly happening with their bodies during, that transition into puberty. And somehow I think what happened, you got connected with her somehow and found out something surprising about her.
Space. Yeah. And so she just came up because she does school chats, educating teenage girls about their menstrual cycles. And she was coming up to Newcastle, so she just said, hey, we should catch up if you're there. So yeah, we got to meet up and have lunch together before COVID. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
And what was something that you learned about her? Like it was a bit of a, I don't think it was a surprise, but we're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, well, that she was a Christian as well, and that I picked that in her before she said anything, because she was just sort of sharing her journey, and it was just that she had shared about why she got interested in getting to the hormone sort of space was because she started researching it before she got married. And to me, I said to myself, well, most people don't wait until marriage anymore. I think this girl's a Christian. And then one time there was a Q&A that came up and someone actually asked her what religion she is, and she said Christian. And I wrote to her straight away and I said, I knew it. Because you can, it does come across as well in just the way that you live your life, I think. Yeah,
and that's a beautiful thing that there's a time and there's a season for different health ministries, obviously. Just this time last year I was in Mindoro in the Philippines, and we were doing in Mindoro in the Philippines, and we were doing a just like a preaching tour in a certain area on the island. And one thing that they did was a massive medical mission, which is definitely needed in that community because it was simple dentistry, minor, vaccinations and, checking, dressing wounds and all sorts of things that were going on there. And that was very clearly heralded as an Adventist initiative. And I think sometimes when we think of health mission, and especially online, we think of the big names. So we think of Sanitarium and Veggie Delights in Australia, and Loma Linda's Franks in America, and these Loma Linda's the university and the research that they do. And I think sometimes people are unsure how to get involved in health ministry online on their own. And funnily enough, the way that you've been able to do it as an individual and in a personable way, I would say in a lot of ways, it doesn't outshine, but it reaches a different community. It reaches people that really need to engage with quite sensitive topics, things that there's been a lot of shame about. And I think it's such a beautiful representation of how Jesus, navigated that. One of the first, people that he healed was a woman that had an issue of bleeding for how many was it? I'm thinking it's either 12 or 20 years or something.
Yeah.
Not to tell so much information, but just even when, you have a menstrual cycle and it just goes too long and you're just like, I just want it to end, and it's been like a week. Like imagine just the shame attached with that, with the culture and the misunderstanding, which still happens today.
It still happens today. I read a comment the other day saying that someone had been bleeding for 1.5 years nonstop. So it's still something that's not very well understood in the medical community, for sure. Yeah,
and just this shame attached to that, and the unknown of what's wrong with me, or what have I done wrong, or we like to think that that the conversation that happened with Job and his friends is long gone, this idea that, oh well, you deserved it kind of thing. But there's a unspoken narrative, I think, that sometimes people say, well, you intentionally did something and this was the penalty for that sin, in a sense. And here Christ comes along and he's just like, hey, like, I'm going to help you understand how to receive full healing from this. and it's individuals rather than corporations, I think we're a lot better positioned in terms of the health ministry to do that. We have the opportunity in an online sense to kind of hold somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, I'm going to walk you through this, or hey, I'm open to discuss this with you, or what are your questions, or who can I put you in touch to get you some support. And that's a beautiful thing that happens, especially on Instagram. I found in my experience it's been the vulnerability with which people share is so different, right? I think Facebook's definitely a bit of a different, more political and argumentative space, but Instagram
is a great platform. I'm really glad I chose it. I think when I started, I was terrified of like online bullying, because that happens a lot, but Instagram's a really beautiful platform. Like I've hardly had any of that in the however many years we've had that. And yet people just looking for genuine connections on there. And for the most part, Instagram's lovely.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's a place where not just you feeling comfortable to share, but other people going, finally a safe place where I'm heard as well. You're sitting on the floor and you're video calling, and as I said, you've got Malachi, your son, kind of show up as well, and people are going, oh, she's a young, mom with a young kid, and then she's got, you're handling all these things, and you're talking quite, I would say, openly from what I've experienced about today I'm feeling a little anxious, or so this is what I'm going to do to take care of myself in this way. And that's, I think, something that is beautiful when we as people of faith show that this is where I'm at, and I'm so glad that I'm journeying to understand my anxiety and my the healing journey that I'm on, that in a sense it's not that it never ends, but you learn that there's new chapters along the way, and for people to walk through that, I definitely see that, or at least I'm journeying through that when I learn new things through you as well. So
when I was healing from my anxiety issues, one of the most empowering things for me was just sitting on forums and listening to other people's stories about how they came through, because I think people are always looking for hope. So even if it's not an identical story to yours, just hearing that someone else can get through it means that you can get through it too. So yeah, that's all. And I think some people might not think they're very talented or gifted in many things, that they don't have too many skills to offer the world. I was definitely like that. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of work experience or anything like that, but the one thing that we all have, whether online or not, is our influence, and we're just constantly influencing those around us. So that's probably the most powerful thing we've got, and it's something that I think we should take like responsibility of, I guess.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, like, has there been any stories or testimonies of people that have connected in with either your blog or your Instagram, that you found just has actually blown you away in your faith journey? Like you've been like, oh God, you're really using me. Thank you so much for putting faith or trust in me to do this.
There's a couple. I think for the most part, what I sort of get blown away by is how God in his foresight gives me a new piece of information that I may have never known before, the day before somebody asks me for it. So there's been so many times, I just research and study because I love it so much, and I just do it for the sake of it. And I listen to podcasts, and I will come across some piece of information that I never knew before, and the next day someone will be in my DMs asking me a certain question, and what I had learnt the previous day will be exactly for that person. So for me, I think it's just, I get very humbled by the way that God is sort of leading my research in my knowledge to help the people, and how it can be actually quite personal in many ways. But I think for a particular testimony. The first one that comes to mind is I had a girl just reach out to me with a question over one of my recipes. And I could tell within a few seconds of talking to her that she'd struggled with an eating disorder, because she was just very calculated and very obsessed over measurements and that sort of thing. And in the end, she ended up just leaning on me with all of her major anxiety in her eating disorder. And over time, I actually ended up visiting her in hospital because she was hospitalized for eating disorder in Melbourne. And I managed to say a prayer for her and really introduce her to God. And she was very open to it because she's obviously in a world of suffering. And she's still suffering, she's still going there, but it was just nice to have this platform offer that sort of connection, and knowing that I was able to pray for her, and I still pray for her. And even tonight, before I got onto this webinar, I was talking to her, and she just said, "I'm in a world of panic. What do I do?" And I told her to pray. And she said, "How?" I don't know how. So we just said a little prayer together, and I hope God helps her calm down. But yeah, that was sort of the first one that comes to mind, because I'm still talking to her now. Yeah.
That's really interesting. You know, you didn't set out, in a sense, it's like there are different stories. So Jesus, we think of the Samaritan woman at the well. The story actually goes that he shows up on the outskirts of the city or the town that she's in, and basically the only interaction that happens is him with her, and then they leave town again, him and the disciples, and and then you have stories where Jesus is just literally walking through town, just on his day off doing his thing, and then all of a sudden somebody reaches out to him. In a sense, when we position us as ourselves, and this is what I see is happening with your blog and your Instagram, is that you're positioning yourself to just go about your day and share about what you're passionate about and talk about what you're passionate about. But through prayer and through just having that mind for mission, to be able to take notice or let God, tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, this is the stuff that you learned, as you said, I need you to apply this here." And I can.
No, I'm a big believer in, just that God gives you your experiences in life and allows you to go through them for a purpose. And, as painful and as horrific as they can be at times, God always has the ability to help you reframe your experience and use it for good and use it to help others. And I think that's probably the most powerful thing that we can do, because no one else has had your story. And no one else can, share that with the world like you can. And so it's really about understanding what specifically in your life, has God set you up to do through your own personal journey. Yeah.
Somebody shared here as well that I asked people if they wanted to share like just little things in how they've really been impacted by their journey with plant-based health or changes. And someone said, I found when my body was changing, diet, how my diet played a part. The only thing close to taking hormone supplements I use is drinking red clover tea. I rely on God and healthy living to go through menopause. So this person is sharing something that, I'm obviously I'm not quite at the age of menopause yet, but also sharing things like being in green spaces in the garden, in a place where you can find release from stress, and that's the health message isn't just eating the right thing, right? It's also knowing how other things impact our emotional and even hormonal health as well. Sometimes I think sometimes you share about that. I see either stories of ensuring that you get out for a walk, especially during COVID, a neighborhood safe walk or something that's focusing on getting that stress down, because obviously with hormonal cortisol and adrenaline and all those types of things, it's such a cyclical journey of like, you know, it's impacting your body, and then your body's impacting your mind, and then it's kind of this cycle. And so do you get much time aside from your recipes to share about other elements? If we think of like New Start, or, you know, those types of ideas, the acronyms that the
I do,
churches.
obviously not as much. Like, I think I'd speak about diet most and the educational hormone stuff, and then the next thing I speak about is the anxiety, mental health type situation. But there have been many times where I've shared a lot about one of the most powerful things for me in my anxiety, in my really bad stage and withdrawals, was getting out into nature. And so I do like to bring that in when I can, because I remember at that stage, it was so powerful that I could be having a really, really, really bad day. And Maddie, my husband, could see that, and he would literally be like, right, I'm taking the day off work. We're going to go drive to the rainforest. And when I would be in the rainforest, I was up in North Queensland, Australia at the time, it would just go away instantly for the period of time that I was in nature. So that was really crucial to me. Every day, getting out in nature. Yeah. So I do like to share more from my personal perspective in things that helped me, and knowing that they are in line with, the laws of health and New Start and that sort of thing. Yeah, helps, I guess.
Yeah. I think you're painting that complete picture, but you're also making it very human in the sense that you're like, oh, by the way, like, this is stuff that, yes, I struggled with in the past, but sometimes it comes up for me now. I mean, the world does not stop throwing stresses at you, like stress balls, ORS at the end. And that's the thing of how we handle that. We obviously set our body up however we can in the best possible position. But then we also need to, not retaliate to stress, but have a rebounding response to it, because our body's still designed and has this function to protect. And so it will send things like adrenaline in a stressful or traumatic situation. And if you're not running a marathon straight afterwards, in a sense, I know the evolutionary perspective is just like, oh, we don't need to run from bears anymore, but our ancestors did. And so in a sense, though, this becomes really important information, that, the hormonal health stuff, that even people that have suffered from trauma, and finding balance from that as well. I guess when you're sharing this kind of stuff, I just wonder if you've ever struggled or had any frustration with the process of sharing online, or even just, you mentioned that you had lost a lot of engagement when you took a break for your own family's health, in a sense. Do you ever feel some, sense of disheartenment? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, that was probably the worst time after I had my baby, and it wasn't about losing engagement. I was losing followers. So I dropped, I don't remember how many followers I dropped, but I remember I was on 45K when I had my baby, and then I took almost a year off, and I didn't lose any followers then, even though not being active. But as soon as I got back into it, I started losing, and over a period of a year, I think I dropped down to 36K. And there was just nothing I could do to bring that around. And that was incredibly disheartening, because it was also around the same time that I figured out how to monetize my blog. And here I am. I think one of the lowest points was I was able to charge a certain amount for my content because of my followers, and then I had dropped below that certain point where I could charge, so I had to lower my price, and that was, excuse me, that was a really tough year doing that. But yeah, I learned to build it back up through genuine engagements with people, and it was very slow and painstaking over time, but yeah. And at the beginning, it was really disheartening. There was many times where I was like, I can't do this. I can't grow this to the point where I can ever, make a thing out of it. But I was just stubborn. I'm just stubborn. That's really what it is. I've always been told I'm stubborn, so I just kept at it. And yeah.
Self-fulfilling Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I have a question, and it might feed into, if anybody else has questions, they're welcome to ask as well. What encouragement can you give to someone who maybe they wish to target health in an online space? It could be Instagram, it could be blogging, but maybe a particular, not just being like, all right, it's the health message, but it's like a particular thing. We want to be reputable, and we want to be a place where people go, yeah, actually I can trust this content. What would you encourage people to invest time doing?
I think it's got to come from the heart. So I think if it's your personal story and experience, and you feel like God has taught you a lot through it, then you'll have a lot to offer. And I think just being really authentic, and because people want to see that people want to follow other people, they don't want to just follow information. And I think just for me is and I've mentioned this before, what always kept me grounded when you get confused is just taking it back to the basic living by design. How were we meant to live before the world fell into sin? And the closer you can get into alignment with that, with all aspects of our health and our life, morality, everything, the healthier you will be. And so when confusing things come up, or you have a lot of debate, and because there is a lot of debate in my space as well about the perfect diet for this and that, and you can at least feel grounded knowing that, well, I'm living, what are the words I'm looking for?
You're living within what God has clearly, well, ideally revealed from the beginning of time. Yeah,
that's it. And it's pretty tough out there in terms of it's really saturated right now. So I think you have if you have a real love and joy for it, you'll make it work. Which is me, because I found a really big passion for it, but a lot of people get very, very disheartened with the amount of work that goes into it. And I think it's only gotten harder. It's gotten harder compared to when I first started a few years ago. I have spoken to numerous people that have wanted to start blogs. And when I tell them the amount of time and effort that I put in, which in my opinion is not even that much, they get very none of them have gone through with it, let's put it that way, because it's a lot more effort than people imagine. It's not really a little side hustle that you can do while you're still working. You can do it, but it's be prepared for the time and effort that's involved.
And thinking of your circumstances, and you seem to have been able to pick up a lot more. I've been using the word inertia a lot today with friends. I don't know if that's really it, but the idea that you kind of keep rolling with it. And I think it's the situation you're in with the support of your husband, and also the age of your son, and there's a little bit he's a little bit more autonomous now, which is sometimes a good thing.
Sometimes. Well, the reason I didn't blog for so long was because when he was a baby, I couldn't even take myself to the toilet, let alone make a recipe and photograph it. So there are points in your life where you just won't be able to do it. I don't know, maybe I was just a new mum trying to navigate my way around things, but it's definitely easier now.
And I think this is the thing, if people really have this on their heart, it seems as though God has already kind of placed it there. But it sounds like what you're sharing is it takes patience, takes perseverance, it takes an acknowledgement that when you said earlier, you mentioned it's saturated out there. And for every time I see Talita, when you post something about hormonal health and I go onto the hashtag of it, there's like 500 times as much new age spiritualistic evolutionary perspectives on the same thing, and a lot of the information is pretty much spot on the same. It's just how they share and express it. And that can be quite disheartening, because somebody will go, oh yeah, we're on the same page, and then at the same time you're like, well, yeah, but except this comes from a God that loves me, and that seems to be the source of where, when I read that type of stuff, I think, man, if only they knew, like their influence is so massive. If only they knew that the power, every breath that they have, and every, all the information that they've learned that's correct comes from a God that infinitely loves them. And I think that, some people say that Adventists kind of missed the boat. Like, we had the health message, and Ellen White's had it, she had it written for us down, 150 years ago. And now we're kind of just overrun by people that believe, very much the same practical elements, but from a very different worldview standpoint. And so that's something, I guess, to be mindful of.
I will tell you one thing that we have in our favor, though. I get so many people throughout the years that want to go plant-based, or are plant-based, or have plant-based children, and they can't keep to it because they don't have the support of their friends and their social network. And I think our advantage as Adventists is that if you're Adventist, you're likely to have Adventist friends, and even if they're not plant-based themselves, they'll understand and they will cater for you. And it just makes it so much easier to live that lifestyle when you have so much support around you. So I think that's a plus for us, for sure. Yeah.
And it seems as though, like, to draw attention quickly to that utilization of the phrase plant-based, as opposed to, you just got a notification, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Sorry, my phone's really loud.
Help me with my hormonal health. There's a lot of using the term plant-based and whole foods is a very balanced, and it's detached from politics and spirituality, which seems to actually bring a lot of safety for people. I know I don't think of, when I hear plant-based, I don't think of all of the documentaries out there about freeing animals from captivity that are going to the slaughter, and all the the visual images of that, and all the protests and the activism and the ugliness that can sometimes come out of that by humans when they have they have an attitude towards meat eaters and that type of thing. And plant-based, the mentality is just really taking care of the human first so that they can take care of others. And I think that really reflects in, even there's balance there, and there's, as somebody who before I was a Christian was looking into this type of stuff, I would tend toward the plant-based blogs over the veganism, because things got a little bit I don't know, it was a bit hairy sometimes. I felt kind of like there was shame attached to if I didn't become vegan, or if I wore a leather jacket that my mum had given me, or so there's grace and there's nurturing. I think that if people are interested in the health ministry, specifically using the terminology of whole foods, which speaks of the wholeness of a person, and plant-based, which focuses on the fact that, hey, like, sometimes dairy products or an egg or something might slip into your food, and it's not the end of the world. You're not.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That plant-based is much more inclusive. So and I highly support, especially if you've come from a different diet, a really slow, sustainable transition. And I think the plant-based community allows for that, which is great, because everyone's on their own journey. And it's definitely a much more inclusive place where you understand that people are on their own journey, and they'll make the moves and change things when they can, not because they have to.
Yeah. There's a quick question here, and we might wrap up shortly, but this is a really good one. I know we touched on it earlier. The question is, do you have a team behind you who helps in technical and other aspects of your ministry?
So it's just me and my husband. That's it. So I do the recipes, and I do the food styling, and I do all the content writing, of course. I write all the blog posts and the research, and my husband does the photography. He does the videos, and he initially did set up my website, and he will, he'll do like the little updates whenever they come around, which is fairly rare. So he's more of the technical side of things, but we've been doing it for a long time, and we're pretty good at smashing it out together fairly quickly. But that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to get someone on though. I would love to one day get someone on because I struggle with the admin side of things a lot. I don't have the time for it. So maybe one day if I ever make enough money to support someone else coming on, but yeah, not for now.
If there's anybody that thinks that their digital mission work is virtual assistants, Talita, just jump into her DMs.
Yeah.
I think she's making enough money.
But I don't have money to pay you yet. Maybe one day.
I think definitely one day we should interview somebody that is a virtual assistant for all sorts of ministries. I'll write that down in my brain because I don't have a pen with me. I just wanted to point out that, you know, you're very blessed in a sense to have your husband do what he does, but it's definitely not impossible. There's a lot of people that self-learn how to do these things. It just takes time. I'm currently designing my own website, and
most of the other influencers, like in my space, like plant-based ones, all do it on their own. So they just learn how to photograph on their own and do that sort of thing. A lot of them will start with just an Instagram account and not a blog, because I guess the blog is, you need the web sort of set up, which is a bit complicated. But yeah, they do great. They do beautiful work. So it can be done. Yeah.
I think that's one thing, kind of wrapping up, but looking at, just to remind everyone that's been tuning in that to check out the Instagram account, which is Hazel_and_cacao, CACAO. Is that right?
Yep.
Instead of cocoa.
Yeah.
So 2 A's instead of 2 O's and switched around. And then the blog hazelandcacao.com. Have a look at some of Talita and Maddie's work in terms of the teamwork that they do to create the images and things. There's something very beautiful about the orderliness, if that's a word, the structure and the aesthetics of what you guys do, which shows that you're very passionate about creating a quality content, which speaks a lot.
My light just died.
Which speaks a lot to the fact that God himself created such beauty and quality in the food that we eat, and wants us to enjoy the beauty of aesthetics, not in a shallow way, but in a way that truly highlights all things beautiful. And so definitely jump onto those blogs. And Talita, I wanted to thank you because when I said, hey, how do you feel about sharing about digital missionary work? You kind of were like, oh, is that what I am?
Yeah.
And I think you know
I was like, really? No, I don't. I don't consider myself that way at all. And yeah, I think when you sent me you sent me the little questions beforehand that we were going to talk about, and you said the testimonies, and my initial reaction, I was like, I've got none. What am I going to say? And then when I started to think about it, it made me realize how, in my own small way, God had used me in some capacity. So yeah.
But all the people that are going to be impacted in such a way as, you know, the hormonal and the mental health impacts of this food, that gets them from a place of just surviving and kind of struggling through life to being mentally clear enough to perhaps one day walk past a church and go, that has nothing to do with you. They have no idea you're a Christian, and yet they look at that and they've got the mental clarity to perceive spiritual things as the Bible and Ellen White talk about. You've done your job. Like, I think that we underestimate just how powerful our presence online is, and how the little things really do count. And I'm sure when you look over that sea,
it's a hard thing to measure, I guess. But yeah, I guess
and you're not meant to. I would stick to the worldly measurables in terms of success, because we're never really going to know the success of the spiritual measurables. You can't look at your blog and go, oh yeah, we've had 10 baptisms this year, great, my blog is worth keeping open. And online space it can never be like that. People are engaging with so many people, but if you're always reflecting the patience and the goodness and the attentiveness and the encouragement and the content that God's given us to share in due season, then I think that he rewards us. Not that we're there for the reward. I think the reward is just his presence in our lives. But one day you're going to look across and God will introduce you to somebody and be like, oh, who's that? And he's like, oh, it's Instagram user number 1532. And on, you know, in August 2018, you liked a comment of theirs that they shared on your post, and that like gave them the affirmation that they were heard or seen, and that prompted them on to look further into the health message, and then realize that the people that were leading with the health message in this way were the, you know, the Adventist people, who ironically you are a part of that, you know, crew, and you're a part of so many other Christians in the world that are shining their light, and you know, in and outside of the church. And just like Bright Girl Health, like you have no idea at all how this is all going to thread together. And so for those that have listened tonight and tuned in, and those that will listen and watch later, I think that's something that I really want to encourage you guys. And I'm sure Talita, upon reflection tonight, after thinking about, as you said, those testimonies, I'm sure you'd be more than willing to encourage people as well to really be faithful in the little things. Yeah.
And I just think if God's put something on your heart, it doesn't feel like work. So as I said, like I've turned a few people off and I tell them the amount of hours that that go into it. But for me, it doesn't feel that way, because it's really quite a beautiful feeling knowing that you're where you're meant to be. Like you've honed in on your specific purpose that in life, at least career-wise. Yeah. So if God's put something on your heart, you will enjoy every minute of it, even the hard, discouraging parts as well. Because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in your own way. Yeah.
And I can speak to that. I was just messaging Talita before this, watching the movie Free Willy. I don't know how many people know about it. It's a great film. When I was very young, about a little boy that's a foster kid, and I'm telling the whole story now, a foster kid, and he gets set with a family and is cleaning up this Sea World, or this orchid, this tank for porpoises and whales and that type of stuff that do shows. And I was just like, oh man, I'd much rather be watching the end of this film and like watching it when he finally frees the whale, Willie the whale. And but I was like, but no, God, like I really enjoy connecting with people the way that this, you know, Adventist digital missionaries and the Gain channel and you know, the GC of our church is actually really encouraging
I just wanted to say something on that just a little bit. I don't know why this just came into my head, but I just also want to encourage any introverts out there that the online space is a great space for you. And it can be, it can. I'm a huge introvert myself, and but a lot of introverts feel way more comfortable online, and you know, more willing to be more open with other people. And it's, you know, I think social media and that sort of thing, and rightfully so, gets a lot of sort of negative stuff said about it, and rightfully so but you can you know, you can make it your own thing, and it can be a really much more comfortable way to engage with other people, and be just as effective, if not more, if that makes sense. Yeah,
exactly. I like Toledo. I'm an introvert. I'm outgoing, and I think God's really changed that about me, because before I was just like, I was described as a mouse, and people thought whether I would ever actually succeed at anything like even a retail job. But the great thing about being an introvert and being online is you just switch off the screen and you you can walk away from a conversation like it's not so like rude or I don't encourage that,
but I think also but I think also for me, like being an introvert, talking to people one-on-one in real time, I always get really worried that I might say something that might come across wrong. But when you're online, you can think about what you're saying and be intentional about it. And it just gives you a lot more freedom to feel more comfortable knowing that, you know, you're not going to accidentally say something that will offend someone or whatever. Of course, it's not always that way, but yeah, I just think it's a comfortable space for introverts. So if you're like that, yeah.
So even for the introvert, God has set you upon this earth and on this planet to be the ones that do hang back in the corner of the party that is the online space and have those deep and meaningful conversations one-on-one. And people like Talita and I can definitely say myself, actually, she and I sometimes have those D&M. Feed the people within the church, not just without. But yeah, it's such a great point to make about introverts. We should talk about introversion in the online space as a topic as well. I need to write that down. What was the other one?
Okay. Well, there you go.
It's gone. If anybody remembers, just shoot us a message. But yeah, just to wrap up, I just want to thank you so much, Talita, for sharing, you know, what is essentially, you know, you could share practical tips, you could share a PowerPoint, you could do all those things, but what you really shared is a bit of your heart in terms of what you're passionate about, the story of where it came from, and the fact that you've just poured out so much encouragement for those that are tuning in. So if anybody has any questions, feel free, after this goes live and is published, you're welcome to ask those questions, and I will personally feed them back to Talita. But if you have questions about anything that we've actually raised this in tonight or this morning or wherever you are, the episode, follow Talita on her blog and get her chatting on her Instagram. She loves it, apparently. Somebody's just reminded me that the other thing was about virtual assistants, so I'm just going to mentally
write it down somewhere.
introversion in the online space and virtual assistants. Maybe the virtual assistants can be the introverts as well. We'll see how we go. But I just wanted to wrap this up, if it's all right with you, Talita, and those listening, just with some prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for giving us your wisdom, Lord. We don't claim any of this as our own. We don't claim to know the ends of the earth in terms of knowledge on the health message or how to interact in the online space. But what we do know is that you've called us to communicate the three angels' message and to give glory to you, which happens to be, in this instance, through sharing of how plant-based food, the diet, Lord, and interacting as closely as we can with your laws of living, how that brings glory to you. So Lord, we just thank you as we all go about our day, or as we head to bed, or as we tune in and even reflect on some of the things that we've learned in this episode. Lord, we just thank you so much that you will guide us onto the next steps of being authentic digital missionaries, and in encouraging other people in our faith to do the same. We pray and thank you so much, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.